But yeah, if you've done your hair today and you're happy to be on camera, then join us. So this is the final briefing for the pilot that we're doing, which is why we're recording it. So anybody that hasn't been able to come to any of the 3 sessions, or for anyone that has joined that just wants a recap, we'll send this out. I think Nisha's going to pop it somewhere on YouTube, hopefully not for public show. Can we lock it to just people that we know? So for those that don't know me, my name's Laura Plant. I'm Head of Allied Health Professionals at East Cheshire NHS Trust, and I was involved through the Cheshire and Merseyside AHP faculty in one of the work streams that kind of started the faculty. So it's the Skills Passport work stream, and I volunteered to lead on that. We've got Nisha, who what's your official title, Nisha? I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Nisha. I'm Cheshire and Merseyside AHP faculty lead. I'm seconded to this post till November now.
Brill, thank you. And we've got Graham here as well. Graham, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Graham. I'm the project support coordinator for the faculty.
Brill, thank you. So Nisha, Graham and myself are points of contact if you need anything after this meeting, and if anything we've not answered. It shouldn't take a full hour and a half, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for any questions. Okay, so Graham, are you able to share your screen, please?
Yeah. Can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you. Perfect. Okay, right, so we'll get started. If everyone can just mute themselves, really helpful. That's brilliant, thank you. Okay, so if you can go on to the next slide for me, please, Graham. So hopefully what we'll cover in the next hour or so is some information about the Cheshire and Merseyside AHP faculty for those that don't know anything about it. Some background to the AHP faculty workforce stabilisation project, of which the Skills Passport workstream was one of those. So we'll give you some information on kind of the journey so far of this workstream. We'll talk you through some of the areas that are willing to pilot the Skills Passport and the timeline that we want to follow and some of the key points related to the pilot. We're also going to talk through the actual Skills Passport that's been developed, what's in it, some of the scoring that we've put within it and how to use that, where the passport will be and how you access it and how you actually work through the passport itself. We're then also going to cover what support we can offer during the pilot and how we kind of plan to evaluate the pilot. And then, like I said, we have got some time at the end for any questions and answers. Okay, so next slide, please. So I'll pass over to Nisha. She'll talk us through a little bit about the faculty.
So hi everyone again, and it's nice to see faces finally at the back of the emails that we've all been exchanging. So just a brief overview of the Cheshire and Merseyside AHP faculty. The faculty itself came about with some initial funding from Health Education England. And in that first round of funding, we had 24 faculties set up in England. There was a process of bidding, and Cheshire and Merseyside was successful in getting some of that money. The whole idea of the faculty is to collaborate and to bring together the AHPs who work in the different sectors across Cheshire, Merseyside and the Wirral. So we've got representation not just from the NHS organisations, but from social care, primary care, private sector, and of course our universities as well. And it really is about supply and demand of the AHPs in the next so many years because of the NHS long-term plan, which talks about having 24,000 more AHPs nationally by 2024. It's a big ask. It's how we get there. So there's in those bullet points, there's a few themes on which the faculty would base its sort of work. And it's mostly around stimulating demand for AHPs, increasing placement placement capacity, and also looking at development of staff who are existing staff members, so retention strategies as well. So our faculty has been functional since July of last year. And as Laura said before, this was the first project, the workforce stabilization project. So if you can go on to the next slide, please, Graham. So this project came about because data was showing that there's a very high degree of movement of Band 6 and Band 7 AHP staff within Cheshire and Merseyside. Some of it was because we are about 18 organizations within this patch. We had to then delve deeper to see which particular professional groups were more affected by this. So looking at data from HEE and doing some qualitative analysis of surveys, etc. as well, we narrowed it down to Band 6 physiotherapists who were talking a lot about not having clear career paths, to feeling undervalued compared to other professional groups. So it was looking at what strategies could be put in place to retain those staff in the organizations that they are currently working in. So on that screen is just few of the thoughts of the staff from initial surveys that were done. Next slide, please. So the faculty uses a very project management approach to deliver on the work that is set to us by the AHP Council. So we report directly to the AHP Council in Cheshire and Merseyside, which is made up of the lead AHPs. So the priority is set by them, but we are sort of the doing arm. So based on that ethos, and based on all the data that was coming back from the Band 6 physiotherapists, 4 work streams were identified as strategies that we thought we could pilot to see what feedback we get. The whole idea is that we pilot stuff with the Band 6 physios, but then roll it out to other AHP groups in due course. The 4 work streams are detailed there. So the first one talks about having a shared job description for Band 6 physiotherapists across the patch, across Cheshire and Merseyside. This is to reduce the amount of variation and bring some standardization in the level of roles and responsibilities expected of this group. The next one was around having a skills passport. So this is again to provide some sort of competency passport, which could be used irrespective of boundaries of organizations. The third work stream is looking at cross-organization rotations. So could we have a rotation opportunity where a staff member could rotate to another organization without having to leave their substantive post or going on a secondment? So a set rotation wheel. And the last one is looking at a method of staff deployment across the patch, however, taking into consideration what the staff worries and anxieties are around that, but standardizing that process across the patch. If anyone wants to find out more about any of these work streams, please get in touch. I will pop my email in the chat box as well. Next slide, please. So I think I hand over to Laura from this one.
Yep, thank you. So we've gone through a couple of phases with the skills passport. So phase 1 commenced in July last year, and we had an initial project group to set up version 1 of the skills passport. Within that group, we came to some consensus that we would align it to the 4 pillars of advanced practice just to foolproof it for future rollout. Like Nisha said, we want to perhaps roll this into other professions, but we also want to look at the Band 5 competency framework, Band 7, and so on. So we agreed that we'd have leadership, education, research, and clinical components to the framework. We had conversations and looked at what was already out there in terms of frameworks, scoring, assessment methods. And we talked about potentially what core clinical specialist areas to include, and we omitted some of the more bespoke specialities that perhaps wouldn't be across multiple organisations. We had really good representation at the meeting from an organisational point of view, so a nice range of small district generals, bigger teaching trusts across Cheshire and Merseyside. And at the end of that phase, we linked in with some subject matter experts to actually look at the clinical content. So their feedback kind of led us into phase 2, which commenced soon after in November 2020. And what we had from the subject matter experts was there was some gaps in some of the clinical areas. And I think we recognised that because in the initial project group, we didn't have every clinical area represented. So it was really useful to get that feedback, and that kind of paved the way for what we needed to do next. So we set up some speciality subgroups, breaking each of the areas down by clinical area. And those subgroups went off and looked at what had already been put in place, and the content. Was it pitched at the right level? Was it using the right language? Did it reflect what they thought as specialist areas a Band 6 physio should be assessed against? And those clinical subgroups signed off their clinical area. So then that all came back together for the final version. I don't know what version we were on, probably about 82 by that point. But the final version, so in phase 1, we'd confirmed the leadership, education and research component. We'd pulled together the introduction and all the kind of wraparound. And then in phase 2, we finalised the clinical areas. We then started to talk about where it should sit and how we might provide some version control and easy access. So the skills passport was then uploaded to the HEE website and the Learning Hub, which we'll go on to talk about. And towards the end of that phase, we had an MMU physio student who was on a leadership placement. So they did some survey and scoping for us about how we might run the pilot. So some of you may have responded to that survey, but that's kind of helped us with some of the things we've put in place. And we've started to scope out potentially pilot teams and areas that would get involved. So next slide, please, Graham. So this is just a snapshot of actual organisations who've agreed to be in the pilot. And similar to our project groups, we've got a nice range of different organisations. So we're hoping to get some really useful feedback. Next slide, please. So in terms of the pilot timeline and key points, so the aim of the pilot is to gather that feedback from a range of organisations and a range of specialist areas, basically to inform us is what we've developed fit for purpose, and if it is, how we then go on to roll it out, and if it isn't, what we need to do to make that that fit for purpose and for it to work. So we've given a 3-month period in which we want to run the pilot. So that will commence on the 1st of September until the end of November. The intention is that it's used by specialist physiotherapists at Band 6 level who work across Cheshire and Merseyside, and they can be in a static or a rotational post. What we are asking for the purpose of the pilot, and I suppose for the purpose of the competency framework to be useful, is that there's some supervision in place, but for the pilot that takes place on a monthly basis. It can be as well as, or it can be incorporated into any current or monthly supervision that you have in your organisation. The supervisor needs to be someone within the team that has the knowledge and skills to be able to clinically supervise that specialist physiotherapist, and where possible remain consistent, just so there's that carryover and that continuity. So we are really encouraging people to read the introduction and the guidance. You can't really go wrong if you read through that. It's really clear as to what the purpose of the framework is and how you'd use it. And that's really important to do prior to your first supervision session. So taking the time to read through it, work out where everything is, and kind of what you need to plan for is really important. We're hoping that by within the 3-month period, you should be able to do 2 to 3 supervision sessions, which will just give that time to be able to test it out and give some really valuable feedback. There's absolutely no expectation for the competency to be signed off or the whole pack to be completed for the purpose of the pilot. That's not the intention for the pilot. Obviously, that can be you can continue with it for the individual for that reason. And then we're looking for some monthly feedback, and we'll be sending out a survey monkey, and we'll be putting out various options of support that will be there for during the pilot. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So I think this is you now, Nisha, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm just gonna make sure I go through all the points. So this is really the nitty-gritty of the skills passport now. It was based, to start with, we based it on the multi-professional framework for advanced practice in England. There was loads of ideas around what frameworks to consider, but this one seemed to have all the domains that needed to be covered as agreed by the work stream. And it also gave the specialist physiotherapists the chance to progress if that's what they aspired to do. Now, we keep saying specialist physiotherapist, and I think when we looked at literature from the CSP, instead of calling people or referring to them by their pay grade, we were looking at standardizing some sort of job titles as well. So specialist physiotherapist was the one that came across when we looked at some literature as well. So when we say specialist, we mean band 6 in this case, but trying to move away from referring them by their pay grade. The passport was designed for the professional development of specialist physios and to give them an understanding of their own learning needs, so they are able to focus on their growth. So it's very much driven by them. They are in charge of their skills passport. When we eventually introduce this system-wide, the specialist physiotherapists should be able to use this passport between organizations to demonstrate their skill sets. So it has, I just want to point out that it has not been designed to initiate any capability procedures or performance management. However, if it's been used and it's been embedded in practice, then it can be used to demonstrate any evidence of development or lack of it, as agreed between parties in such cases. Next slide, please. So what's in the passport? So as with the 4 pillars of multi-professional advanced practice, this one is divided into 4 pillars of leadership, education, research, and clinical domains. The clinical pillar is further divided into some core areas that the work stream agreed on and are detailed on the next slide. Obviously, there are other areas that our physiotherapists work in Cheshire and Mersey, but the work stream thought to first go with the core areas and then look at exceptions at a later date when it's time to update. So those on your screen are sort of the core clinical areas that are covered in the skills passport. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so each pillar and clinical specialty is further divided into sections of knowledge, skills, and behaviors. The behavior section refers to any specific behaviors that are more pertinent to that area and not general conduct, etc. Okay, so that slide just tells you what is meant by each of those. So knowledge, as it says, it's more around the theoretical knowledge, any, evidence out there, national guidance, etc. Skills are sort of the practical assessment, intervention, skills required to, administer or prescribe by the physiotherapist. And behaviors is observable conduct towards others in response to situations in the workplace. Okay, let's move to scoring. So each knowledge, skill, and behavior can be scored according to the key that is shown there. And the introduction session, as Laura said before, details each of these to the best of its ability. Now, there will be some degree of subjectivity. We try to get rid of it as much as we can, but it's very much dependent on each clinical area and each supervisor. So we couldn't take subjectivity away 100%, but hopefully the introduction gives a good outline of what each of the grading actually means. Also, the skills passport asks for evidence. So hopefully providing evidence as to which level the physiotherapist sits on, it will take away some of that element of subjectivity as well. The passport acknowledges that not all competencies will be completed in that area, and therefore it offers the not applicable and the no opportunity scoring elements as well. Just a point to note, if a specialist physiotherapist was new to an area, or if they have never worked in an area, then they would start at developing and not ineffective. Because you know, we have to take into account their previous experience of working in a different area, or if they are moving from being a band 5 physiotherapist to a band 6 physiotherapist, they would have gone, you know, gathered their own knowledge, skills and behaviors as a band 5 physiotherapist. So if they were starting in a new area, we say that they start at a 2 and not a 1. Okay, I know I'm conscious that I'm whizzing past a little bit, but I think there's opportunity for Q&A later. So please make a note of your any queries and questions, and we can go through them afterwards. Okay, so with that, if I ask Graham to show you where the Skills Passport is actually hosted, how you can get access to it. Over to you, Graham.
So the Skills Passport is held on the Learning Hub, which is it's a website developed by Health Education England. So it's fairly new. I think it's only come around this year, and it's a bit like a contributors website. So anyone who sort of works within the NHS or health and social care in general can put out their own resources, and they can be used by other members of the NHS and social care. So it's really, really easy to sign up to. You register for a username and password using your NHS email, and that's what gets you access. If you've got access to e-learning for healthcare already, you can use your username and password for that as well, and that will automatically give you registration. So what I'll do, if I just flick to the website itself, so this is your homepage for the website, and it's literally just learninghub.nhs.uk, and that will take you straight to the homepage. So once you've done that, you can sign in. So it won't normally take you to that page, it'll normally take you to this page. And the passport itself is really, really easy to find. So the faculty has its own catalogue on the website, where we post any of the resources. So the resources like this one that we've made, or the toolkit that we've made for clinical placement expansion. So all you need to do is type in Cheshire and Merseyside into the search bar, and that will bring up anything that's relevant to what you've searched for. So for us, our catalogue is the first one that shows up. So Cheshire and Merseyside AHP faculty. And from there, it'll take you straight into our catalogue. You've got a bit about the faculty itself, and then you've got the resources that we've created as a faculty and then uploaded. So for this one, it's Cheshire and Merseyside AHP faculty specialist band 6 physiotherapist skills passport. And from there, the first thing that you'll see on there is the document itself. And then further down, there's a bit more information about the document. So all you need to do to download it is click on view this file. And then that will download straight to your download section. So do you want me to go into it first, or do you want to move on to and then show it a bit later?
It might be useful to go into it now, Graham, and then yeah, that would be real. Thank you.
No problem. So once that's downloaded, you just need to wait for that to open. And then this is your front page of the skills passport. So as you'll see, it's split down into your introduction, your education, leadership and management, your research pillars, and then your different clinical pillars. And then each of these documents, all you need to do is click on them to open them. So if I click on education, that will then open the education part of the skills passport. So the reason why we've done it as embedded documents is because anything you then type into this, and anything you type into the actual skills passport part, if you then save that, it will save within that original document. So whenever you go back into education, all the information that you've put in around sort of your levels expected, where you're at, and your evidence will remain in there then.
That's brilliant, thanks Graham. So I don't know if you just saw on the screen then, you could see where it was broken up into the knowledge, the skills and the behaviours, and then the scoring was going along. And as part of some of the feedback we'll be asking you about how usable that is. But yeah, if you register for the Learning Hub, that's live now, so you can go and have a little scout around it and get familiar with the content and the layout. That's brilliant. So can we go on to the next slide, please, Graham? Okay. So like we said before, really important to read the introduction section so you understand the scoring system and the process to follow. The first supervision session is really to identify a baseline. So that will be a conversation between the supervisor and the supervisee as to potentially what their objectives are, what your expectations are of the rotation or the role that they're in. And within the expected level column, you'd agree what they should be working towards at that session. And I suppose that will be based on what area you work in, the type of service users you see, whether you're rotational or static, and potentially future aspirations. So if it's an area that you're potentially working towards a band 7 role in, you might be aiming for more higher level competencies. If it's an area you're rotating through, it might be a different level. And as Nisha alluded to before, there'll be certain competencies that you might think, well, they don't apply to our area, or there won't be any opportunity to do those. So you can mark those with not applicable. We're suggesting that the education, research and leadership pillars are something you only need to complete once. So if you do rotate in your role, you don't have to repeat competencies in those in each rotation. You might build on them if that's appropriate. And I suppose this is a really good opportunity to be collecting evidence for career progression. So if you do build on them and you're collecting the evidence, you might want to use that for job interviews or things that you might want to do further down the line in your career. So once you've set out the expected level, the individual, there's a self-reflection column to score yourself of where you're currently at. And I think there's a specific conversation to be had around setting goals, SMART goals with realistic timeframes and an action plan. So for the purpose of the pilot, that might not all get completed, but it's being clear that you've set out what the expected level is, but how are you going to get there and by when, and what support might you need. And so that's really clearly documented. And then really important that you arrange your follow-up session for a month's time following that first session. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll be sharing today's slides. As we said, we've also recorded the session, so this will be sent out for people to watch back or share with colleagues that perhaps haven't been able to make it. In our clinical subgroups, we had leads for each of the clinical areas, bar, community and mental health. So on this slide here, everybody that was a lead for the clinical subgroup has agreed for their email details to be shared. And the point of that is for you to be able to contact them if you've got any queries about the content of the clinical section. So it isn't to contact them and say, is this person competent or not, or how do I use the passport in general. It's more to say, I just want to clarify this bit of detail in the clinical section. From a community and a mental health point of view, we did have wider support to develop that, but we didn't have named clinical leads. So we've popped myself, Nisha's and Graham's name on just to come back to us if you did have any queries about that, and we can hopefully help or signpost you. Again, we've put our names down, myself, Nisha and Graham, for any general inquiries. We've also popped on the email address for IT support for the Learning Hub. So if you have any problems with logging on or accessing the passport, the link's there to get in touch with them. What we're proposing is that we're going to put some MS Team drop-in sessions on throughout the duration of the pilot. So they're open sessions, you don't have to come to them. We'll send an invite to all, and we'll be on there. And if no one joins, we'll do our emails, and if you want to join and ask a quick question, then that's absolutely fine. And then, as I said before, we had a survey that went out that one of our physio students led on, and one of the things that came back from the survey is that people involved in the pilot would value some peer support. So if everyone's happy, we were going to share contact details, so emails of the supervisors and the supervisees involved in the pilot with the specialist areas. So you might want to look at down the list, and if you're, for example, looking at frailty in your area and another trust is, you may want to get in touch with them and say, oh, what are your thoughts about this, or how have you used this? So with everyone's consent, we'll be sharing those details. So what we'd ask is, if you don't want your details sharing, if you could let us know, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so next slide, please. So the pilot evaluation, I think I've already said about the pre-pilot survey. We asked people potentially going to be involved in the pilot how they'd like to feedback, and the majority said regular monthly feedback via a Survey Monkey would be easiest, as opposed to meetings or other means. So the Survey Monkey will be sent out to both the supervisors and the specialist physios. And what we're trying to capture from this Survey Monkey is two things. So A, are you on track and on target with the pilot? We know things happen, so you might be all geared up to go and you might have staff sickness. We know that there's still lots going on with COVID and various things. So and you can contact us at any point to say if you're having any problems, but there'll be a question on the Survey Monkey just to check that you've had your first session, or whether there's any reasons that you haven't. And then also some feedback on whether it's fit for purpose. So there'll be a range of things covered in terms of layout, language, structure, how easily the scoring was, the content. It shouldn't be a long, lengthy feedback. It's all in tick boxes with the opportunity to put comments in. So the aim will be that will be done after the first month, the second, and at the end. So there'll be 3 small Survey Monkeys that will go out. And to be able to send them out, we do need to make sure we've got everybody's email contacts. Sorry. So I think we're still open to people joining the pilot, and we've seen a few extras come on. So we just need to make sure that Graham, Nisha and myself are really clear who is involved, and not just the organisation, which individuals in the organisation are A, the supervisor, and B, the Band 6 physio that's actually testing it out as well. Okay, so I think that's the last slide, or the last slide is any questions. So we'll open it up. If you want to come on and speak, that's great. If not, you can pop it in the chat box, whatever's easiest.
Hi, it's Beth Mitchell, community physio in Merseycare. I have a few questions. Yeah. I'm one of the physios that interviewed for this and was accepted. As far as I'm aware, the other girl that was accepted also, she's withdrawn for various reasons. So I know I spoke to Alex Spirit last week and she said that they are recruiting more people, but my understanding at the interview process was that this was to be a 4-month pilot and it was to start on the 13th of September. Now, you've just said it's 3 months and it starts on the 1st of September, so I'm a little bit confused now.
Can I come in on that, Laura, if that's okay? Hi, Bethan. So it's Nisha.
Hi.
So yeah, I think you were talking about the cross-organization rotations, aren't you? So so yeah, thank you for applying for that one, by the way. But yeah, you're right. That particular pilot, when we first started, was going to be a 4-month one. So you would probably have worked slightly different from the rest of the group, which is just doing skills passport and not rotating, if that makes sense.
Okay, right, that does make sense.
Yeah, so in your case, we would have probably worked with you and whoever's going to supervise you to do it for, say, 3 months out of the 4, or letting you, carry on for 4 months. So we would have had those discussions in due course. So if things are not going ahead with the rotations because of the other candidate pulling out at this stage, then it's whether you want to still be part of the skills passport work and trial this for 3 months. So that's something, if you want, you can come back to us and let us know.
Okay, so just another question then about the skills passport. That doesn't involve the rotations. It just involves you, as me in my own place of work and going through it that way, right? So it's separate to the rotational part of it.
Yeah. So we were trying to see if we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by trialing it in the rotations work stream as well, in order to give the person who's rotating something to work towards as well, a sort of a career pathway thing. But yeah, if you're interested in doing this independently where you currently work, we would welcome that. We don't have anyone, or not anyone, but we don't have loads from the community side as well. So it would be great to have you on board if that's what you decide to do.
Okay, that's fine. I'll speak to the band 7 then, and then see, because she came on the previous one of this the other week, and so I'll ask her if she's happy to do it with me, and I'll get back to you. Is it you, Nisha, that I need to get back to say whether we'll be involved, or any one of the 3?
Yeah, myself or Graham or Laura is fine. Or copy us all in, and we'll just make sure we update our engagement sheet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think just adding to that, the 4 work streams do overlap and interlink. So if we're trying to aim to have a standardised job description across, a standardised competency framework across, that supports with any potential future rotational roles across as well. And yeah, so it's just timing it, isn't it? But I suppose the purpose of this is to try and just pilot the usability of the skills passport.
Okay, thanks.
Real, thank you. Has anyone else got any other questions?
Hi, it's Jenny. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Jenny.
Hi, a very naive question and a technical one. So you go on to the Learning Hub and you download that document. Do you then just save it and work from it? It's not uploading back onto the Learning Hub, is it? No.
No, I think what Graham was meaning is if you download the entire thing and then open and save, it saves the entire thing.
It back into the one document. Yeah.
Rather than you save in a file that's education, then a separate file that's leadership.
Yeah.
And I think what perhaps we didn't say was there'll be some areas that you cross over. So, for example, palliative touches a lot of the clinical specialist areas. You could be seeing end-of-life patients in MSK, you could be seeing them in frailty community. So rather than duplicate in each of them, there is a end-of-life palliative section. So you might dip into bits of that. And again, that's what we're looking for feedback on. Is that dipping in and out workable, or is it better to have it duplicated in all of the specialist areas? So yeah, it allows people to flip between, and if you're not rotational, you still might want to dip in and out. Graham, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it was just in talking about when you're using it, it has to be used on a desktop or a laptop. It can't be used on a tablet or an iPad or anything like that, because when you open the actual main part of the passport on a tablet, it won't open the embedded files after that. So it has to be used on a desktop or laptop.
Yeah. Brill. Okay. Anyone else want to ask anything while we're here? Like I said, we're contactable at any point. So once we've sent the slides out and the recording, if you think, oh, I didn't ask that, then bob us an email. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Brill. So like I said, we'll get the slides sent out. If you don't think your full details have been shared in terms of what role you're in, whether you're the supervisor or the supervisee, and that you make sure we've got your email addresses, if you can send them through to us, and then we can just make sure we know who's doing what and where. Lovely. Nisha, Graham, was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we have everyone's details, bar maybe some of the newcomers on the call. So there is a sheet that we require you to fill out to say who the supervisor and the supervisee are, and if you want to give any details of your clinical/team lead as well, for us to keep in touch. So if you've not filled that sheet, we don't have your details, so please do get in touch.
Yeah. Brill. Okay. So what we'll do is send out the information, and then we'll send out the drop-in sessions towards the end of September, end of October, end of November, and if you can't make them, like I say, just contact us in between. Graham?
Yeah, sorry. Alexandra Gilbertson just said she's piloting it with a new starter, but she has another starter on the 16th of September. Are they able to be a part of the pilot as well, even though they're joining a little bit late?
Yeah, I think the more the merrier. I think if you feel you can fit in at least a couple of supervision sessions to give it a good enough go with them, then yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Brill. Okay, so if everyone's happy with that, we'll leave it there, and yeah, any problems, just get in